Sometimes you don't even realize how much of your life has been spent on emotional autopilot, reacting, overthinking, defending, explaining, absorbing, and spiraling, until you finally meet someone who simply doesn't. You watch them, the way they move through the world like water gliding over stone. Something goes wrong. They breathe. Someone lashes out. They blink slowly and stay still. Where most people would spiral into a pit of mental chaos, they stay grounded. And you can't help but wonder, what are they made of that? You're not. But the truth is, they're not made of something different. They've just learned something that most people never do. Peace is not something the world gives you. Peace is something you protect. And most people have never been taught how to protect it. We're trained, from childhood, to believe that the world dictates our emotions, that we're just along for the ride, that if someone hurts us, it's our job to feel broken, that if we fail, it's our job to feel ashamed, that if someone disrespects us, it's our duty to fight back. We think emotions are our compass, when in reality, most of the time they're the chains, and so we live like leaves in the wind, at the mercy of every breeze, every storm, every shift in temperature, with no root, no ground beneath us, no silence between the feeling and the reaction. Until one day, if you're lucky, something in you snaps, not in a breaking way, but in an awakening way. And you think, why am I letting things I cannot control me? Why am I handing over my energy to people who didn't even earn my attention? Why am I exhausting myself trying to win battles that don't even belong to me? That's the moment everything begins to change. Because the real game of life isn't about being the strongest, the smartest, or even the kindest. It's about becoming the most emotionally untouchable version of yourself, not in a cold, detached way, but in a deliberate, sacred way. It's not about not feeling things. It's about feeling deeply, but choosing wisely what deserves a home in your mind. Because here's the raw truth. Most people never want to admit, being reactive isn't a personality trait. It's an emotional weakness. And people will exploit it, as long as you let them. They'll press your buttons, then act shocked when you explode. They'll say the cruel thing just to watch you unravel. They'll create chaos just to see how far they can drag you down with them. Not because they're evil, but because they're broken, and misery loves company, especially the kind that reacts. That's why silence becomes your sword, indifference becomes your armor, detachment becomes your sanctuary. Not because you don't care, but because you do, about your peace, your growth, your future. And the more you care about those things, the less you care about proving a point, being right, or getting revenge. You stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided who you are. You stop giving energy to things that don't give anything back. And this isn't some magical transformation. It's a daily discipline, a choice, a habit. It's asking yourself every morning, where am I going to spend my emotional currency today? Because energy is currency, and most people are emotionally bankrupt, not because of what happened to them, but because of how they've been trained to respond to what happens. They overinvest in things that don't matter. They react to things that don't last. They fight battles that don't belong to them. They hold on to anger, like it's a shield when it's actually a prison. And somewhere in that mess they lose themselves, not because the world is too heavy, but because they keep picking up weight that was never theirs to carry. And this is where the shift begins. You stop picking up everything. You start walking around with a new kind of clarity, a new kind of inner stillness, where before you react, you pause. You pause to ask, is this mine? You pause to breathe instead of bite. You pause to think instead of attack. You pause long enough to remember that not every emotion deserves your attention. Not every insult deserves your energy. Not every conflict deserves your presence. You learn to let people be wrong. You learn to let situations be messy without needing to fix them. You learn to let go of what is not yours to hold. and slowly, you become a new kind of person, the kind who doesn't flinch when triggered, who doesn't chase validation, who doesn't need chaos to feel alive. The kind who understands that true power isn't loud, it's quiet, it's calm, it's invisible. It's the power of someone who knows who they are, what they're worth, and what they no longer need to explain. And that power, that's the kind that no one can take away from you. Because it's not based on being liked, it's not based on getting even, it's not based on controlling others. It's based on controlling yourself, your reactions, your focus, your energy. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes you unshakable. That's what makes people stop in their tracks and say there's something different about you, and they'll try to figure it out. They'll poke, they'll prod, they'll test you. But nothing sticks, nothing moves you, because you've done the inner work. You've sat with the discomfort long enough to know that your reaction is your responsibility. And once you own that, truly fully own it, you become untouchable in a world that profits off your triggers. You rise above, not because you're better, but because you're done playing the game that everyone else is still stuck in. And that's where real freedom lives. You start to realize that emotional control isn't about being numb. It's about being wise. It's not that you stop feeling. You still feel everything, sometimes even more than before. But now you filter it. You don't let everything that knocks on your emotional door walk inside, take off its shoes, and ruin the carpet of your peace. You decide who gets in. You decide what stays. And most importantly, you decide what gets no response at all. Because silence has a weight, a presence, a language of its own. And when you learn to use it correctly, it speaks louder than any argument, any outburst, any dramatic scene ever could. It tells the world, I don't need to prove myself to you. It tells your enemies, you hold no power here. It tells your old wounds, you don't get to reopen every time someone breathes the wrong way. And that's when the healing begins, not the surface kind, the deep kind, the kind that no one sees, the kind that doesn't get applause or attention, the kind where you sit alone, breathe through the storm in your chest, and say to yourself, this emotion is mine, but it doesn't own me. That kind of healing changes your life, because it means you no longer need to react to be real. You don't need to scream to be strong. You don't need to win the war to feel worthy. You just need to stay rooted in yourself, in your truth, in your intention. And yes, it gets lonely, because the more you grow, the less company you keep. Not because you don't love people, but because you've stopped needing to be around people who drain you, just to feel less alone. You learn to enjoy your own silence, your own energy, your own company, and the world will misunderstand that. They'll call it selfish, they'll call it arrogant, they'll call it too much. But you've been not enough for too long to care. You've shrunk, bent, twisted, contorted, silenced and sacrificed just to be accepted. And where did that get you? Burnt out, used up, emotionally starving. So now, you take up space. You protect your peace like it's oxygen. You stop apologizing for needing rest, distance, solitude, boundaries. You stop justifying your absence from chaos. You stop giving explanations to people who only listen so they can twist your words. And you start showing up differently. Your presence becomes quieter, but more powerful. You don't chase, you attract. You don't argue, you exit. You don't beg, you embody. You don't explain, you live. And people will notice. Some will be drawn to your light. Others will be triggered by it, because your peace reminds them of the war they're still fighting. Your silence reflects the noise in their head. Your emotional control exposes their lack of it. And instead of doing their own healing, they'll try to rattle you. They'll test your calm. They'll try to drag you back into the chaos you've outgrown. But you won't bite. You'll just breathe, pause, smile, and walk away. Because not every battle is yours. Not every opinion is valuable. Not every invitation to chaos needs an RSVP. You'll learn that the most powerful thing you can ever do is not engage. That's where your strength shows up. In the non-reaction, in the graceful exit, in the refusal to fight someone else's internal war. You start to see people clearly, not for who you wish they were, but for who they keep showing you they are. And instead of trying to fix them, you let them go. You stop mourning the potential. You stop making excuses for patterns. You stop tying your worth to your ability to rescue people. You realize that love doesn't mean sacrificing your peace. Compassion doesn't mean self-destruction. And connection doesn't mean codependence. You can love deeply and still walk away when your soul is starving. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can understand without accepting disrespect, because now your boundaries are not walls, they're filters. They're not designed to shut the world out. They're designed to keep your energy protected, and anyone who sees them as a threat was never meant to sit at your table anyway. You begin to realize that not everyone deserves access to you, that your energy is sacred, that your time is currency, that your peace is non-negotiable. You stop being available to people who only reach out when they want something. You stop engaging in conversations that go nowhere. You stop justifying your needs to people who don't honor them. And most importantly, you stop asking for permission to feel what you feel, to want what you want, to walk away when it no longer serves you. This is what real maturity looks like. This is what healing creates. Not perfection, not constant happiness, but awareness, the ability to pause, to choose, to respond instead of react, to protect instead of perform. And the more you live in that space, the more life begins to mirror it back to you. You attract people who value your peace, because they value their own. You create relationships built on mutual respect, instead of emotional imbalance. You speak less but say more. You do less but mean more. And you finally feel safe in your own mind, in your own body, in your own presence. That's not something anyone can give you. That's something you give yourself. That's what being emotionally untouchable means. Not that you don't feel, but that you've learned how to honor your feelings without letting them control you. That you've learned how to move through the world without handing the keys to your peace over to anyone else. That you've become the kind of person who can be in the middle of a storm and still know this too will pass, because the storm is loud, but your silence is stronger, and no one, not a person, not a past, not a trigger, gets to take that away from you ever again. You begin to understand that silence is not just a reaction, it's a revelation. It's the ultimate test of strength in a world that screams for attention. It's where you find the truth behind all the noise, and that truth, it's liberating, because you no longer need to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer chase closure from those who ran away from accountability. You no longer dig for clarity in conversations that were always meant to confuse you. Instead, you rise in your stillness. You find freedom in your pause. You let people keep their twisted stories and broken narratives, and you carry on with grace. That's emotional power, knowing that you could respond, expose, retaliate, or defend, but you choose not to. Not because you're weak, but because you finally realize your energy is too sacred to waste on anything that doesn't grow you. You become selective, not out of arrogance, but out of self-preservation. You no longer water dead plants. You no longer pour into people who poke holes in your cup. You no longer give pieces of yourself away just to make others feel whole. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that never saw your worth in the first place. You stop pretending to be okay with crumbs when your soul is starving for more. And that shift, that silent rebellion against self-abandonment, that's where your life begins to transform. You stop asking why they hurt you, and start asking why you allowed it. You stop obsessing over what they did, and start healing what made you tolerate it. You take accountability, not the kind that shames you, but the kind that empowers you. You start saying, "That was on me, but now that I see it, it won't be again." And that's not bitterness, that's clarity. That's the birth of boundaries. That's the moment you stop rescuing people from the consequences of how they treated you. That's the moment you say, "I deserve more than survival." And when you get there, when you really get there, it's like breathing for the first time. It's like waking up from a nightmare you didn't even know you were trapped in. You realize how many times you betrayed your own heart just to keep the peace. How many times you silenced your intuition just to stay close to someone who kept hurting you. How many times you abandoned your truth for the comfort of connection. But connection without respect isn't love. Affection without consistency isn't care. And presence without safety isn't intimacy. You finally see the difference between someone wanting you and someone valuing you. Between someone needing you and someone showing up for you. Between someone saying the right things and someone actually doing the right things. And that clarity, it's painful at first, because it means grieving the illusion, mourning the fantasy, letting go of the version of them you built in your mind. But once you get through that grief, there's peace. A peace that doesn't need validation. A peace that doesn't rely on apologies. A peace that says, I see it now. I feel it now. I choose myself now. And that's not selfish. That's survival. That's healing. That's what it means to become emotionally untouchable. Because you no longer live to be understood. You live to be aligned. You don't need people to agree with your boundaries. You just need to honor them. You don't need people to validate your journey. You just need to keep walking it. You stop making room for those who only show up to drain you. You stop holding space for those who never had the capacity to hold you. And you start moving in silence. Not because you're hiding, but because you've found your peace. And not everyone deserves access to it. You no longer post every move. You no longer announce every plan. You protect your dreams from people who only want to dim them. You guard your heart from people who only love you in pieces. And in that silence, something beautiful happens. You reconnect with yourself. You remember who you were before the world taught you to abandon yourself. You hear your own voice again, not the one shaped by fear or rejection, but the one filled with wisdom and truth. The one that says, you're not too much. You're just finally enough for yourself. And when you reach that point, you no longer need to be loud to be powerful. You no longer need to be seen to feel worthy. You no longer need to be chosen to feel loved, because you choose yourself now, in every moment, in every decision, in every breath. And that self-commitment, that's where your true power lives. In the quiet decision to rise, in the sacred act of not reacting, in the unshakable truth that you don't owe anyone access to the healed version of you who did the work while they watched you suffer. You become your own safe space, your own home, your own protector, and no one, not a lover, not a friend, not a memory, can take that away from you ever again. But there's something else that happens once you truly choose yourself, something deeper than just walking away or setting boundaries. You start to feel the weight you've carried your entire life slowly peeling off your back, one layer at a time. Not because the people who hurt you finally apologized, not because the world suddenly got softer, but because you finally decided you're no longer going to carry what was never yours to hold. You realize that some of the pain you've been dragging around wasn't even yours to begin with. It was projection, it was guilt tripping, it was manipulation disguised as love. And once you see it for what it is, you can't unsee it. You remember the moments you bent yourself backwards just to be enough. The times you over-explained your heart to people who didn't even have the decency to listen. The nights you laid awake replaying conversations, wondering what you could have done differently, only to realize later that their mistreatment was never your fault. It was their character showing, not your worth diminishing. You begin to understand that some people only love what they can control. And the second you stopped being easy to manipulate, you became a threat. Your voice became inconvenient. Your silence became deafening. Your healing made them uncomfortable. And that discomfort, that's not your burden to carry anymore. You no longer dim your light just to keep others from squinting. You no longer downplay your growth just to stay connected to people committed to stagnation. You no longer allow guilt to keep you loyal to versions of yourself that were only surviving. Because now you're not just surviving, you're transforming. And with that transformation comes clarity so sharp it cuts through every illusion you used to cling to. You see how many times you gave chances in the name of love, when what you were really doing was abandoning yourself in the name of hope. Hope that they would change. Hope that they would finally treat you right. Hope that the bare minimum would grow into something sacred. But hope without evidence becomes a trap. And love without mutual effort becomes a prison. And the moment you stop living in potential and start living in reality, that's the moment you set yourself free. Free from the cycle of trying to earn what should have been freely given. Free from the idea that if you were just a little more patient, a little more forgiving, a little more quiet, things would have worked out. No, they wouldn't have. Because it was never about what you did or didn't do. It was about what they were never capable of giving in the first place. And once you accept that, your entire inner world shifts. You stop blaming yourself. You stop needing closure. You stop waiting for someone to come back and validate your pain. Instead, you validate it yourself. You say to your heart, "You didn't imagine it. That was real. And I'm so sorry you had to endure that. But we're safe now. We're not going back there." That's what healing sounds like. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's the quiet reclaiming of your power. It's the decision to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer you a bandage. It's waking up and choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, truth over fantasy. And let's be honest, there will still be moments where the past tries to haunt you. Moments when you miss them. Moments when you wonder if you made the right choice. But missing someone doesn't mean they were right for you. And grieving someone doesn't mean you should have stayed. It just means you're human. It means you loved deeply. It means your heart was pure. But even a pure heart must learn when to let go. Even a loving soul must learn when to stop giving. Not because love is wrong, but because you matter too. Your needs, your peace, your dreams. They matter just as much as anyone else's. And once you fully believe that, once you stop making yourself small to keep others comfortable, you begin to attract an entirely different life. You stop chasing people who run. You stop begging people to see you. You stop explaining your worth to people who never had the capacity to hold it. Instead, you sit in your silence and let your healing speak for itself. You let your absence teach them what your presence never could. You no longer prove your value. You embody it. You no longer explain your choices. You honor them. And that, more than anything, is your liberation. That's your rebirth. The moment you realize that choosing yourself isn't a betrayal to anyone. It's a coming home to everything you forgot you deserved. And maybe the most beautiful part of choosing yourself is realizing just how far you've come without even noticing it. You look back at the version of you that used to tolerate the bare minimum, and it feels like a stranger now. Not because you hate who you used to be, but because you finally see how much pain that version of you was carrying in silence. You finally see the exhaustion behind that constant smile, the invisible bruises behind the laughter, the way you kept showing up for everyone else while silently begging someone to notice you, to ask how you're really doing, to care without conditions. And when no one did, you still kept going. You still kept loving. You still kept believing in the goodness of others, even when they kept proving you wrong. That kind of strength isn't just admirable, it's sacred, because the world tries to convince you that silence is weakness, that boundaries are rude, that choosing yourself is selfish. But you now understand that none of that is true. You see how society rewards overgiving, especially from women, how it glorifies self-sacrifice and labels it love. But real love doesn't demand your exhaustion. Real love doesn't ask you to lose yourself in order to keep it. And the more you heal, the more allergic you become to anything that costs you your peace. You begin to crave solitude over shallow connection. You begin to enjoy your own company in a way that feels safe, not lonely. You stop chasing after people who leave you confused and start honoring the clarity that comes with being alone. Because being alone isn't the same as being abandoned. There's power in solitude. There's clarity in quiet. And sometimes the greatest love story you'll ever live is the one where you finally choose you, not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but out of reverence for the parts of you that survived what tried to destroy you, for the parts of you that kept beating even when no one noticed, for the little girl in you who just wanted to feel safe, seen and cherished, and for the woman you've become, who is finally learning how to give herself all of that and more. There's a tenderness that comes with healing, a softness that doesn't make you weak, but makes you wise. You begin to see people more clearly, not because you're judgmental, but because you're no longer willing to lie to yourself about who they are. You see the red flags for what they are, not invitations to prove your worth, but warnings to protect it. You don't entertain confusion anymore. If someone makes you question your value, you quietly remove yourself. No explanations, no drama, just peace. And it's not because you don't care, it's because you finally do. You finally care enough about yourself to stop handing your energy to people who squander it. You finally care enough to stop playing the role of the emotional savior, because you've learned the hard way that some people don't want healing. They want attention. They don't want accountability. They want control. And you're no longer available for that. You're no longer interested in relationships where you have to teach someone how to love you properly. Love isn't supposed to be a lesson in pain. It's not meant to feel like a test you're constantly failing. You've graduated from that school. You've outgrown those classrooms. You've walked away from the need to be chosen, and walked into the truth that you've always been worthy, even when others didn't see it. And that kind of awareness, that kind of internal shift, it changes everything. You start to dream bigger, not because you're chasing validation, but because you're finally giving yourself permission to be seen, to be celebrated, to take up space. You start setting goals that align with your peace, not your pain. You stop working from a place of proving, and start creating from a place of joy. You stop needing others to believe in you before you start, because now you believe in you, and that belief radiates. It touches everything you do. It seeps into your tone, your posture, your decisions. You walk differently. You speak differently. You love differently. Not with desperation, but with discernment. You understand that your energy is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. You don't hand out front row seats in your life to people who only clap when they benefit. You keep your circle small, and your standards high, not because you're better than anyone, but because you've finally realized how rare your spirit is, how rare your love is, and how dangerous it is to keep giving that kind of rare soul to people who only see it as replaceable. And maybe that's the final piece of it all. You no longer need closure from those who broke you, because your healing is the closure. Your peace is the closure. Your joy is the closure. You no longer wait for the apology that may never come. You no longer wait for the acknowledgement that you were right, or kind, or loyal. You let the truth be enough. You let your healing speak louder than their denial. You let your evolution be your revenge, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because the best way to show the world that you're no longer available for mistreatment is to stop returning to the people who offer it. The best way to prove your worth is to stop entertaining places where it's constantly questioned. And the best way to honor your growth is to keep growing, even if it means growing alone, because you've learned that peace is not found in the presence of others. It's found in the presence of self. It's in the way you breathe deeper, the way you no longer flinch at the sound of their name, the way you smile now, not because life is perfect, but because you are finally free. Free from the chaos, free from the confusion, free from the war you kept fighting inside your own heart. And that freedom, it didn't come from anyone else. It came from you, from your courage, from your decision to stop shrinking, to stop chasing, to stop settling. It came from your choice to rise, even when it hurt, even when it was lonely, even when it felt like everything was falling apart. Because deep down you knew it wasn't falling apart, it was falling into place, into alignment, into truth, into the kind of love you've always deserved, starting with the love you now give yourself. There comes a quiet moment in your healing when you stop needing to explain yourself. You no longer scramble to prove your worth to those who were never ready to receive you. You don't chase clarity from people who gave you confusion. You stop fighting for a place at tables where your voice was never valued and your presence was barely noticed. You simply walk away, not in bitterness, not in rage, but in soft certainty that you deserve better. And in that silence, in that withdrawal, in that surrender, you find your power. Because the most profound transformation doesn't happen in the noise of conflict. It happens in the stillness of letting go, in the sacred decision to stop bleeding for people who never offered you a bandage, in the choice to stop setting yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. And when you make that decision, not once but repeatedly, day after day, you begin to rebuild your life around truth instead of illusion, around presence instead of potential, around joy instead of justification. You begin to value yourself not based on how others treat you, but on how you choose to treat yourself, and that changes everything. That heals everything. You realize that healing isn't about becoming unbreakable. It's about learning that you don't have to break for anyone anymore. It's not about closing off your heart, but about filtering access to it, about giving your tenderness to those who can hold it with reverence, not recklessness. You begin to understand that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. They are sacred entry points that say, only those with clean hands and honest hearts may enter. You don't build those doors out of fear, you build them out of wisdom. Because once you've tasted betrayal cloaked as love, once you've been manipulated by charm, once you've been drained by the constant emotional labor of trying to fix someone who refuses to fix themselves, you no longer confuse effort with alignment. You don't mistake intensity for intimacy. You don't call chaos chemistry. You've learned that real love feels safe. It feels grounding. It feels peaceful. It doesn't ignite your anxiety. It soothes it. It doesn't make you second guess your worth. It reminds you of it. And if it costs you your mental health, your self-esteem, or your sense of safety, it's not love. It's emotional warfare disguised as connection. And so you stop participating in that war. You lay down your weapons, not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. You've realized that some battles aren't worth your energy, some people aren't worth your explanation, and some endings are actually beginnings dressed in heartbreak. You understand now that not every loss is a tragedy. Sometimes, losing people is the most divine redirection the universe could offer you, because what you thought was rejection was actually protection. What felt like abandonment was the clearing of a path you were never meant to walk. And as painful as it was, as much as it broke your heart, it also broke you open. It made room for clarity, for purpose, for peace, and eventually for the kind of love that doesn't require you to abandon yourself to keep it alive. You begin to see yourself differently, not through the lens of your trauma, but through the eyes of your truth. You stop calling yourself broken and start calling yourself brave. You stop seeing your scars as flaws and start honoring them as proof that you survived what was meant to destroy you. You learn to sit with your sadness without letting it consume you, to feel your anger without turning it inward, to hold space for your grief without drowning in it. And that emotional fluency, that ability to face your shadows without shame, is the beginning of true empowerment. It's the foundation of authentic self-love, because loving yourself isn't just about bubble baths and affirmations. It's about radical honesty, about looking at your own patterns, your own wounds, your own complicity in your own pain, and choosing to do the hard work anyway, choosing to rewrite the script, to unlearn the lies, to parent yourself with compassion, to stand up for the version of you that was never protected, and to become the person you always needed when you were hurting most. You no longer define your worth by who stays, you define it by who you become. You no longer view relationships as salvation, you see them as mirrors. Some reflect your wounds, others reflect your growth. But either way, they teach you something. They show you what you're still holding on to, what you've outgrown, and what you're finally ready to receive. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? and start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That shift from victimhood to wisdom is the alchemy of healing. And from that place, you begin to attract differently. Not because you're manipulating the universe, but because you're no longer energetically aligned with what hurt you. You're vibrating at a frequency that only matches truth, only matches peace, only matches love that's real. And what's real doesn't confuse you. It doesn't gaslight you. It doesn't punish you for having needs. It meets you where you are, with open hands and a steady heart. No games, no drama, just presence. And maybe for the first time in your life, you become okay with not knowing. You stop needing to control every outcome. You stop begging the universe for answers. Instead, you start trusting the timing of your life. You start trusting yourself. You give yourself permission to feel your way forward, to fail without self-hate, to rest without guilt. You allow yourself to receive, to be loved without performing, to be seen without shrinking. And you realize that the woman you're becoming, the one who speaks her truth, honors her needs, and protects her peace, is the woman you were always meant to be. Not perfect, not invincible, but whole. And in her wholeness, she finds everything she thought she needed from someone else. Love, safety, belonging. Not because someone else finally gave it to her, but because she finally stopped withholding it from herself. And one day, without warning, it just won't hurt the same anymore. You'll wake up and realize that the weight you carried for so long isn't crushing your chest like it used to. That ache in your soul, the one that used to scream in the silence, is quieter now, not gone, maybe, but softer, manageable. Like a scar that no longer stings, only whispers its history in the quietest corners of your memory. You'll walk past the places that used to haunt you, and you won't flinch. You'll hear their name, and feel nothing but neutrality, or maybe even a gentle sense of gratitude. Because they taught you something, didn't they? Not about love, no, not real love, but about what love is not, about what you'll never tolerate again, about the parts of yourself you needed to retrieve from someone else's hands. They made you bleed, yes, but they also made you rebuild. They cracked you open, yes, but that pain let the light in. They abandoned you, but in doing so, they forced you to come home to yourself. And that was the greatest gift. Because the truth is, you were never broken, you were becoming. Every tear you cried watered the soil of your future. Every sleepless night softened your soul and sharpened your insight. Every moment you doubted your worth was just a layer of conditioning being peeled back to reveal the truth. You were always enough. Not because someone said so, not because someone stayed, but because your existence, in and of itself, is worthy. Period. You don't need to earn love. You are love. You don't have to chase peace. You create it. You are not a reflection of who couldn't see your value. You are a reflection of every quiet moment you chose to keep going, when it would have been easier to give up. Every time you held yourself through a storm. Every time you refused to shrink, just to be accepted. That is your power. That is your beauty. That is your truth. And maybe, just maybe, you'll look in the mirror and finally recognize the woman staring back at you. Not the broken version, not the begging one, not the one who tolerated crumbs and called it a feast, but the reborn version, the one with fire in her soul and softness in her eyes, the one who doesn't apologize for her needs, who knows her worth without needing external validation, who speaks, not to be liked, but because her voice matters, who walks away when peace is disrupted, who no longer tries to save others at the cost of drowning herself. She has boundaries now. She has grace now. She has power that no one can take away, because it's rooted in her, not in someone else's presence or approval. She doesn't chase love anymore. She embodies it. And from that place, everything changes. The way she walks, the way she chooses, the way she loves. Everything flows from her center now, not her wounds. So if you're still hurting, let this be your reminder. Healing is not linear. Some days you'll feel like a goddess, others you'll feel like a ghost. That's okay. You're allowed to ebb and flow, to collapse and rise, to be both the fire and the ashes. Just don't stop, don't settle, don't go back to what broke you, just because it's familiar. You're not that woman anymore. You've outgrown the version of you that begged for love. And what's ahead of you? Peace, real love, divine alignment, is worth every step you take away from what wasn't meant for you. The life you crave is already waiting. All you have to do is keep walking, keep trusting, keep becoming. And when you finally arrive, when your soul is no longer starving, when your spirit is no longer drained, when your heart is finally held with care, you'll understand why it had to happen the way it did. Not to break you, not to punish you, but to wake you, to shape you, to lead you back to the one place you always belonged, yourself.